In March 1997, the authorities responsible for policing the UK's Peak District were forced to initiate a high-profile search and rescue operation. Local residents reported seeing an unidentified aircraft hurtle from the skies and impact a remote area of moorland. No survivors or wreckage pertaining to this incident have ever been officially recovered, despite numerous witnesses having observed it taking place. What was the true cause of the Howden Moors Incident? In previous episodes, we have discussed the uneasy relationship between the Royal Air Force and the phenomenon of UFOs. In recent times, military authorities in the United States of America have gone public, with official footage of alleged encounters between their pilots and extraterrestrial craft. This has generated global interest in such cases, handled via a very firm but polite response that those involved had no knowledge of what they had engaged. On the opposite side of the Atlantic, the United Kingdom's armed forces have continued to adopt a far more guarded approach in relation to such matters. This can be seen in their response to the events at Rendlesham Forest in 1980 and the incident which took place near the Welsh village of Penturk in February of 2016. Their replies to inquiries from the public and media seemed to initially feign surprise, followed by a somewhat aggressive denial that the incident had ever taken place. And yet, witnesses to purported UFO incidents in the United Kingdom have time and again observed military aircraft and personnel actively involved, conducting ground searches and restricting public access to the scene. This would certainly prove to be the case in the aftermath of a sequence of events which began to unfold on Monday the 24th of March, 1997. It all started in the control room of Ecclesfield Police Station in Sheffield, just after the radio operators working the night shift had settled down at their stations. At approximately 10 p.m, a call was received from an 81-year-old resident wishing to advise the police of a strange incident she had just witnessed. The caller in question explained how she resided in a rural property in Stannington, a small village which was located on the outskirts of Sheffield. The woman then relayed to the call handler how she had been getting ready for bed when she had noticed an unusual light moving through the sky. Walking across to her bedroom window, she made out a strange aerial object, travelling slowly in the direction of the Strine's reservoir. This craft was unlike any plane or helicopter she had seen before, being cylindrical in shape with no obvious method of propulsion. The object was even more disturbing as it appeared to be a flame, generating a bright orange glow which seemed to flicker and dance across its surface. Having thanked the witness for her call, the operator had duly logged the report with his supervisor, who would evaluate it and then determine the most appropriate response. Perhaps understandably, the initial assessment of the woman's call suggested that it did not warrant police attendance. National radio stations and other media outlets had been informing their listeners and viewers for days now that tonight would be the best time to view an expected cosmic event. This would be one of the few evenings where the weather might allow UK residents a clear and unimpeded view of the Hale-Bopp comet as it passed by close to Earth. 15 minutes later, a further report was logged by another of the duty operators, which then caused the previous assessment to be reviewed. This call had originated from two farmers who were out working in their field, which was situated near the village of Balsastone. They were reporting a similar incident, having briefly observed a low-flying aircraft of some description before it had disappeared at speed over the horizon. A short time later, the pair had seen a bright flash from the same direction, followed by what appeared to be several plumes of smoke rising into the sky. When asked to estimate where the smoke was originating from, the witnesses stated that they believed it would be near to a remote patch of moorland known as Marjorie Hill. Their testimony was still in the process of being evaluated when there was a sudden flood of phone calls into the switchboard, all reporting similar information. Amongst these callers was Sharon Aldridge and her friend Joanne, who were camped out by the Strine's reservoir hoping to catch a glimpse of the passing comet. It had been a freezing cold night, the sky completely cloudless, when the pair had suddenly been disturbed by an unexpected and loud buzzing noise. Craning their heads this way and that, they were unable to locate the source of this sound, until a large black object had suddenly hurtled through the sky directly above them. This object was descending rapidly and moving at such speed that they were unable to make out any details which might have identified it as an aircraft. The sound it made was unlike anything either woman had ever heard, not resembling a plane engine or the rotors of a helicopter in any way. The speed at which the object was falling prompted the pair to abandon their viewpoint and drive to the nearest public phone to report what they believed to be a plane crash. Their report coincided with another from a local gamekeeper named Mike Ellison, who was calling from his home only a short distance from the Strine's reservoir. Ellison had been sat watching television with his wife when their relative peace had been shattered by what sounded like a massive explosion outside. Hurrying to his front door, Ellison had scanned the skies around his cottage for any sign of what might have caused the thunderous commotion, but could see nothing. Just then, he became aware of a bright orange glow on the horizon, emanating from a point several miles away in the vicinity of Hope Valley. Ellison described this light as being consistent and steady in nature, very different to the strobing or transient effects he would have recognized as passing vehicles or aircraft. He and his wife were shortly joined by a neighbour who had been disturbed by the same noise, and was also observing the mysterious glow on the horizon. All three were convinced that what they were witnessing was the aftermath of a significant air crash, with something having impacted the ground a short distance from their homes. Assessing the volume and similarity of the phone calls she was receiving, this hypothesis was shared by the police duty incident manager, Chief Inspector Christine Burberry. By 11 PM that evening, Burberry had initiated South Yorkshire Police's formal response in the event of a plane crash within the boundaries of their jurisdiction. Over the next 15 hours, more than 200 personnel from a variety of emergency services and charities would be involved in the search for the downed aircraft. On the ground, police and mountain rescue teams divided themselves up into groups and began to make their way out onto the moors, along their agreed search corridors. Behind them, fire brigade personnel and ambulance staff formed up at their designated rally points and prepared to follow in the event that casualties or wreckage were located. Alongside this, queries were raised with local airfields, including the control tower at Manchester Airport, asking for any details regarding the missing plane and who might be aboard. But these inquiries would prove as futile as the physical searches, and with nothing having been found by 2 PM the following day, the operation was reluctantly wound down. Any hopes that some degree of clarification might be forthcoming during the coming days, however, would not be realised. Instead, the only evidence that came to light over this period would prove to be as perplexing as the initial incident itself. The extent to which RAF personnel were involved in the Howden Moors search operation continues to remain a subject of debate. According to official records which were later obtained via a Freedom of Information request, they provided very limited resources in the search. A Sea King helicopter based at RAF Leconfield had been dispatched to support the aerial search, but that was all. Beyond this, the only other time RAF personnel became involved was to satisfy police inquiries in relation to radar evidence. Their official response was that the radar facilities at the nearest airbase, RAF Linton-on-Ouse, were not manned overnight and had therefore not been recording at the time. And yet, numerous witnesses who were spoken to by the media in the following days reported seeing a whole host of RAF resources in the vicinity. Several calls logged during the late turn shift prior to the crash being reported reference seeing an unidentified military helicopter moving in and around the local area. More concerning still, several witnesses insisted that they had seen other RAF aircraft directly involved in the build-up to whatever had taken place on the moors. A driver on the nearby A61 bypass and a local youth team training at a football pitch in Dronfield all reported seeing 3 fast jets streaking across the sky. Their accounts would be corroborated by a retired RAF officer named John Brassington, who had been disturbed in his Derbyshire home by the sound of jets. Brassington was able to positively identify the planes as RAF Tornadoes, having worked alongside such aircraft in the past, directly undermining the account of his prior employers. There is also the testimony of gamekeeper John Littlewood, who had been out in his vehicle on Midhope Moor at around 10 PM on the evening of the incident. He witnessed a very large transport aircraft with red lights at the outer edge of its wingtips, flying slowly and at low altitude over the moor. This multi-engine plane was similar in size and shape to an RAF Hercules and was gradually descending as it approached from the direction of Stocksbridge. The fact that a no-fly zone was enforced around the area for several hours during the rescue effort prompted some commentators to accuse the RAF of a cover-up. They alleged that this would have allowed military personnel to enter the scene without the knowledge of the authorities, possibly to recover bodies and debris. The reasons for these covert actions were either because the crash plane was one of their own, or that their pilots were in pursuit of an unidentified object, which they then forced down onto the ground. Even without data from the large number of RAF stations that would have been monitoring the skies that evening, there is evidence to support that a crash did indeed take place. Records obtained from the Edinburgh-based British Geological Survey reveal 2 significant seismic events having been recorded near to Howden Moors at the time. These were consistent either with a ground-based explosion or the sonic boom of a fast-moving aircraft travelling overhead. This would again seem to suggest that the RAF may have had reasons to deliberately underplay their involvement in the official record of the incident. When reviewing the entirety of the reports logged with the police on the evening of the alleged air crash, the witnesses divide neatly into 2 groups. Half hold firm that what they saw was a light aircraft, complete with conventional navigation and landing lights, with a single propeller mounted on its nose. Others insist that it looked nothing like a conventional aircraft, instead being a wingless object, illuminated by an otherworldly glow. Shifting away from conspiracy theories suggesting that the UK's armed forces were involved in a dogfight with an alien craft, alternative explanations have been proposed. Perhaps the most obvious is the possibility that people were seeing the Hale-Bopp comet, which so many had been outside hoping to catch sight of. Their perceptions might have been skewed by the vastness of a clear nighttime sky, along with the light emanating from nearby industrial estates, and later, the lights of the search operation. There have also been historic reports of civilian aircraft acting suspiciously over the moors, believed to be linked to criminal gangs operating in nearby Manchester. It is entirely possible that such a flight, consistent with almost half the descriptions offered by witnesses, crashed in the act of dropping or retrieving a consignment of illegal drugs. Such wreckage would not have been immediately obvious to the search teams, as it may have crashed into one of the 13 large reservoirs situated on the moors. There is also the possibility that this mystery plane had ditched in one of the many patches of bogland which dot the local area. Wreckage and even bodies relating to previous air crashes across the region have been lost in this way, sucked deep into the moor's boggy surface. There are also reports that a male had been detained by police at the time, suffering from what appeared to be severe burns, wandering near the Lady Bower Reservoir. South Yorkshire Police denied allegations that this may have been an injured tornado pilot or a drugs runner who had survived a crash. Apparently, a man had driven to the moor, doused himself in petrol in a failed suicide attempt, and subsequently sought medical attention from the authorities. Viewing all the evidence in its entirety, one can't deny how compelling the arguments are that some sort of air crash took place within the Peak District during March of 1997. Whilst there is little doubt that the local authorities have been transparent in their involvement, questions linger over the RAF and their official version of events. It's possible that evidence may still be lying somewhere out in the solitude of the region, waiting to be found, and that such material could finally clear up the debate that still rages over what took place one cold and lonely night in the skies above Howden Moors. Bedtime stories.